today we are going to discuss the fundamentals of audit, and on our agenda we have the following topics: definition, scope and objectives, principles of auditing, the difference between accounting and audit, and every auditor is governed by some standards on auditing. So we will touch upon that, and all the pre-audit preparatory work that is to be done, that is the audit program, audit plan. After that, we would go about talking about the two broad types of audit, that is internal and statutory. But before we get into the technical aspects, I would like to put across some points and some misconceptions that are to be done with. The first thing is, when students hear the word audit, then naturally they think that, okay, this is only for the students who are doing CA or ACCA or CPA. But that is absolutely not true. If you're not on the auditor side of things, you are definitely going to be the auditee. So it is always better to be prepared with how an auditor is going to think, what kind of data is going to be demanded from you, and what is it that you have to keep ready before facing an auditor. The second thing you might be surprised to know is that an auditor's main job is not to find frauds. It is only to give your stakeholders a reasonable amount of assurance that the financial statements give a true and fair view. History has taught us a lot. There have been scams, WorldCom, Enron, which have taught the auditors a lot, and after that, the authorities have tightened the noose on auditors' responsibilities. And point number 3, audit as a service, a consulting service, has evolved greatly over time. So today, auditors and consultants don't just offer audit services. We do exclusive services like mergers and acquisitions, transfer pricing, international taxation, and risk advisory services, legal services. So the focus has always shifted from traditional audit to all these services. And history has actually taught us a lot. There have been a lot of scams, after which auditors have been forced to be more diligent. Here is a short video to tell you how the Big Four evolved and came about as we know them today.
When investors decide to put money into a company, chances are they've looked at its financial statements, which contain audited reports of the organisation's accounts, giving them the confidence to part with their money. For a majority of large publicly traded companies, these audits are conducted by one of the Big Four accounting firms: KPMG, PwC, EY and Deloitte. But their dominance is under threat from regulators. Following the collapse of some high-profile companies, scrutiny is on the conflict of interest between the accounting industry's audit and non-audit services. It's led to calls from the public, politicians and regulators for the breakup of the Big Four and a shake-up of the accounting industry. In 2001, energy company Enron collapsed amid accusations of accounting fraud, which was at the time the largest corporate bankruptcy in US history. The demise of a publicly listed company that was worth over $60 billion left many asking how the firm's auditors, Arthur Andersen, could have signed off on accounting books that overstated the energy giant's profitability. Arthur Andersen ended up being another casualty of the scandal, convicted of obstructing justice and losing the right to file accounts. Less than a year after its conviction, the fate of America's oldest accounting firm was effectively sealed, even though the Supreme Court later overturned the ruling. Andersen's firms around the world were then sold off to members of what became the Big Four. But before the emergence of the Big Four, the market for audit services was dominated by 8 companies that were created through alliances across the Atlantic and beyond. Along with Arthur Andersen, the 8 included Arthur Young, Coopers & Lybrand, Deloitte Haskins & Sells, Ernst & Winnie, Peat Marwick Mitchell, Price Waterhouse, and Touche Ross. The Big 8, as they were known, grew rapidly amid a wider consolidation within the industry, including smaller firms like KMG, which merged with Peat Marwick to eventually become KPMG. Marketed as modern global business networks, competition between the 8 intensified as they expanded internationally. By 1989, the Big 8 started to whittle down further when Arthur Young combined with Ernst & Winnie, while Deloitte Haskins & Sells merged with Touche Ross to form Deloitte & Touche, usually referred to as Deloitte. The Big 6 became the Big 5 in 1998, when Price Waterhouse merged with Coopers & Lybrand to form Price Waterhouse Coopers, now known as PwC. And when Arthur Andersen collapsed, the Big 5 became the Big Four. Their dominance of the industry has grown ever since. In 2019, the Big Four had more than 75% of the global accounting market share, nearly a 10 percentage point increase from the year before, while their revenues during that financial year exceeded $154 billion. The group also has a lock on the world's largest public companies. In 2019, just 5 of the 500 companies in the S&P stock market index were audited by a non-Big Four firm. In the UK, all companies that make up the FTSE 100, the country's blue chip index, were audited by one of the Big Four in 2018. This collective dominance is one reason why regulators are attempting to prise the audit market open to tougher scrutiny and fresh competition. Critics of the Big Four also point out that despite all their resources, including over 1 million employees, there have been several high-profile failures to uncover massive frauds. A few months after Enron filed for bankruptcy, a bigger accounting scandal involving US telecommunications company WorldCom erupted, this time ensnaring KPMG, who took over the accounting books from the embattled Arthur Andersen. While the Big Four managed to emerge relatively unscathed, more accounting scandals continued to rock investor confidence in the years ahead.
I wouldn't hire you to do an audit of the contents of my fridge.
These include the demise of Lehman Brothers in 2008, which was audited by Ernst & Young, now known as EY.
Lehman has lost, as you see right there, 36% of its value.
The insolvent construction giant Carillion, which counted Deloitte and KPMG as its auditors.
We were a customer of Carillion, not the manager of Carillion.
Tour operator Thomas Cook, whose accounts were signed off by PwC and EY, and the 1MDB scandal, which tainted 3 of the Big Four firms. In 2020, German regulators examined EY for approving the accounts of online payments company Wirecard for more than 10 years before it filed for insolvency. Critics believe they avoid properly scrutinising their clients' accounts because this could threaten their consultancy work. Along with auditing, the Big Four offer other services such as management consulting, taxation, market research, and legal advisory services. In fact, these non-audit services provide the lion's share of the Big Four's income. In the UK, only 1/5 of the Big Four's total revenue is generated from auditing. In the case of Enron, Arthur Andersen was earning more from the consulting services it provided to the energy firm than it did from its auditing activities. Critics also claim that the strong growth of the non-audit business, which resulted from changes in the business environment for accounting firms in the 1970s, has impaired the robustness and objectivity of audits. While the standardised approach to audits ensures that financial statements are fairly stated without material discrepancies and that appropriate internal controls are in place, this has led to a mismatch in the expectations and limitations of audits. In fact, a study of nearly 2,700 cases of workplace fraud in 125 countries found that a majority are uncovered through tip-offs, showing the importance of whistleblowing hotlines as opposed to internal or external audits. The Big Four insist, however, that regulations restricting consultancy work are sufficient to protect the independence of their auditing services. These include the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 in the US and Japan's Financial Instruments and Exchange Act. In the UK and EU, auditors are not allowed to provide consulting advice to businesses 1 year leading up to and during the term of an audit contract. Companies included in the FTSE 350 index, the 350 biggest companies in the UK, must also put their audit out for tender every 10 years and must change auditors every 20 years. However, these restrictions, according to regulators, aren't foolproof. When an auditing contract ends, the firm can immediately begin doing consultancy work for the same company, making it less likely for existing auditors to challenge a client if it jeopardizes future contracts for lucrative non-audit work. Some politicians also argue that these regulations are overly complex and hinder competitiveness. Even with more regulatory paperwork and longer annual reports, these accounting scandals have not abated. There are signs, though, that the Big Four realise that the status quo cannot continue forever. Deloitte has set up an audit governance board, which it claims will focus on the policies and procedures for improving audit quality. And EY, in the wake of the Wirecard scandal, has told its clients that auditors should play a bigger role in detecting fraud. The UK's accounting regulator, the Financial Reporting Council, has also set a 2024 deadline for the Big Four to separate their audit units from their other services, although the watchdog stopped short of demanding a full structural breakup of the firms. The Big Four, in response to queries from CNBC, said said that they have taken steps to enhance audit governance, including engaging with the Financial Reporting Council on the principles of operational separation. Audits serve a crucial role in instilling public confidence in financial markets, yet the same costly errors that resulted in the demise of Arthur Andersen nearly 20 years ago are still happening today. Unless the industry can restore confidence that their audits are independent, objective and uncompromised, the pressure will build on regulators to act before the financial world is engulfed in yet another accounting scandal.
Let's start with the definition of an audit. An audit is an independent examination of financial information of any entity, whether it is profit-oriented or not. But what is the objective with which this independent examination is done? It is just to express an opinion whether the balance sheet, P&L, cash flow, all those represent correctly the true financial health of an entity. It is said that with great power comes great responsibility. That is the kind of value that the signature of an auditor holds. Now, what is the responsibility of the auditor? It is to ensure that any company that is having many investors who have given their life savings to it, they depend on the auditor or look up to the auditor to tell them that yes, your money is in safe hands. So it is very important for the auditor to ensure that the company or the entity is using its shareholders' funds in a very, very appropriate and intended manner. Now let's move on to the scope and objectives of the audit. What all areas is the auditor supposed to cover? Now that basically depends on whether it is an internal audit or statutory audit, but in general, an auditor covers all the areas or departments of an entity. You have to verify the assets, liability, you have to verify whether those assets exist, whether the company has actually earned whatever revenue it has displayed, and other miscellaneous areas like HR, marketing, sales, etc., etc. So the scope of an audit is extremely wide and it spans across the entity's entire geographical and demographical presence. Now let's move on to the inherent limitations of an audit. Now we all know that a company prepares its accounting records throughout the year, but an auditor visits the company only at the year end and just probably for 15 to 20 days. So naturally, it is impossible to exhaustively cover all the transactions. So an auditor will only take a sample of the key areas and check. Now it is possible that certain material frauds or misstatements have occurred outside the auditor's sample. Then in that case, the auditor cannot really be held liable for not checking those transactions. So one inherent limitation of an audit is it is done on a sample basis. Now the second limitation. Suppose you are an internal auditor and you have been appointed by the management of the company. Now upon audit, you have discovered that one particular department has been involved in some embezzlement activities. Now you do the entire report and you go to the management. You present your findings to the management and you realize that the management themselves have been involved in this entire operation. Then what do? So it is possible in an audit that the higher authorities do not give you the full information or they are themselves involved in an embezzlement activity or a fraud. So in that case, the auditor has to find a way to navigate this problem and then present their findings. The last but the most important limitation is that everything is done on the clock. Okay, it is important that the company has to publish information within a particular span of time. So the auditor has to certify the financials in a span of 15 to 20 days, and that puts a lot of pressure on the auditor. So there is a risk that there may be some mistakes involved here and there. So these are limitations of an audit, but they can't really be avoided. It comes with the package. Moving on, let's talk about the principles of auditing, in the sense, who is an ideal auditor and what are the qualities that they must possess to be eligible to be called an auditor. The first thing and the most important one is integrity, objectivity, and independence. Now, when you go and approach a client for audit, there is nothing that the client will not do to make you comfortable. Especially if you are going for a statutory audit, you are considered a very important person. So the auditor, the client tends to take you out for lunch, dinner, or they take you out for sightseeing. All those things will happen. Now, if everybody is a human being, isn't it? So we tend to naturally feel, okay, he has done so much for me, the client has done so much, so let me not be very stringent with the audit. That is something that an auditor absolutely cannot do. You are expected to be integral, you are expected to be ethical. So irrespective of what your relationship is with the client, your job should not suffer on any account. So integrity, objectivity, and independence is the first criteria for an auditor. Second, confidentiality. Now, when you are going for an audit, you are given complete access to every company's records. It is your responsibility to keep them safe and not to leak those data to any other party, whether it is on remunerative basis or otherwise. So you have to keep all client information confidential. Third, skill and competence. Now, every auditor has to be trained in their particular field, and they should know what it is that they have to do, what kind of tests are to be established, what kind of vouching is to be done. So unless the resources who are auditing are a chartered accountant or similarly qualified, and the team members are adequately trained, you are not competent enough to do an audit. Next, reliance on work performed by others. Now, during the course of audit, the company's business might be in such a way that you require the input of an engineer or an actuary or any other expert, archaeologist, for example. So you need to ascertain where all you need these inputs from others, and you need to make arrangements to get those input. So reliance on the work performed by others, you need to assess how credible they are and whether you can rely on the report that they are giving you. Next, documentation, planning, and evidence. Every activity or test that the auditor does has to be documented. Every finding that you provide has to be supported by documentary evidence. So on an hourly basis or a daily basis, every auditor is expected to maintain audit files and audit working papers to support their activities. Last is audit conclusion and audit report. So this is done always in discussion with the client, and after the findings are summarized, then the client and the auditor sign the financial statements together and present it to the public. So the first set of points that I talked about are covered by SA 200, overall objectives of an auditor, and those set of qualities are very important for an auditor to possess before they can be considered eligible to perform an audit. The next topic we are going to talk about is audit plan and program. There are a set of pre-audit preparatory activities that every team has to do before they enter the client's office. The first and most significant of them all would be to understand or have a thorough knowledge of the client's business. So unless the team understands what it is exactly that the company does, it will not be able to provide a good value-added service to the client. Neither will it be able to identify mistakes or any gaps in the internal control of the company. So as per SA 320, knowledge of the client's business is the first step towards an audit plan. Next, how many team members do you require, and at what skill levels? Do you require one partner, 2 audit managers, and a set of 10 to 15 article assistants? So we need to plan what are the resources we require and what are the areas that they will handle. So split the entire plan into subcomponents and allocate areas to each team member. The next would be to identify the materiality level of every transaction or every account balance there in the financials. So the audit team has to take up the financials of the company, segregate it, and identify key material transactions and assign a particular risk level so that they will know the minute they take up the data, the first thing they will have to audit is all those transactions that carry a high degree of risk or high chance of material misstatement. Now, more than technical tests of control, it is the key of audit lies in the art of extracting information. So you need to always talk to the previous team members who went to the particular client and understand who will give you information and who will not, and what kind of questions you have to ask to be able to get the data you require, and on a timely basis. So it is very important to understand who is who in the organization and whom you can approach to get your data. Now, every client would have a permanent audit file and a current audit file. The permanent audit file will contain the entire history of the company, vision, mission, leadership, their future plan, the annual report of the company, major investments, geographical presence, everything top to down. The next topic we are going to address is the two broad kinds of audit, that is internal and statutory. So we will have a couple of bases of distinction, and according to that we will speak. The first basis is appointment. An internal auditor is always appointed by the management of the company, but the statutory auditor is appointed by the shareholders at the annual general meeting of the company. Second, what is the qualification that an internal auditor should hold? It is not essential that an internal auditor has to be a CA. They can be any MBA qualified or just a general consultant. It is not mandatory to be a CA. However, a statutory auditor, as per the Companies Act 2013, has to be a qualified chartered accountant. Status. Now, an internal auditor, it is possible that every company has its own internal audit department. So it's not necessary that they have to separately engage a professional, but a statutory audit is always appointed every year, and they come only for a specific period of time in the year, say April 1st, 20 days. So how is an internal audit conducted? An internal audit can be a periodic process. Okay, it can be concurrent in nature, but a statutory audit is a one-time event every year. Next, what is the scope of the work of an internal auditor? That is decided by the management. They can tell you that, okay, this time you please audit only purchases or sales or subcontractor activities. So the management has the authority to decide which area they want you to investigate into. But the scope of a statutory auditor is fixed by standards of auditing and the law. Mandatorily, the auditor has to comprehensively cover the entire set of financial statements without any exceptions. Now, what is the primary purpose of an internal audit or the objective? The internal auditor is supposed to ensure that the systems in place in an entity are functioning properly and they are effective. Suppose we take purchases, for example. The auditor has to ensure that it is happening in a sequential manner, and at every stage of the process there is a particular authority sitting in place who will approve the transactions. So there should not be any gaps or risks in the process. The statutory auditor is not very bothered about the processes of the company. They are more aligned towards whether your assets and liabilities are valued as per the accounting standards prescribed by ICAI. Now, issue of audit report. Generally, there is an audit committee that is appointed by every company, and the internal auditor is supposed to present his findings to the audit committee and the management. The statutory auditor, however, is liable to the public. So they will present their findings to the audit committee, they will present their findings to the shareholders at the AGM, and subsequently audited financials and audit report are published in the newspaper. Next, remuneration of an internal auditor is fixed by the management. For the statutory auditor, it's fixed by the shareholders. An internal auditor is not exactly permitted to attend the AGMs, but statutory auditor has a voting right, and they are also supposed to be present at AGMs because the shareholder has appointed them. So as you can see, the fundamental purpose of internal and statutory audit itself is very, very different. So to summarize, in today's class, we've learnt about the definition, scope and objectives of an auditor, what are the qualities an auditor is supposed to possess, how to plan for an audit, and the two broad types of audit that are internal and statutory. Hope you had good takeaways from the session. Thank you very much.